Okay, so today's going to be a little different. Rather than do any more Gamergate stuff, I found something really interesting I wanted you guys to see. This is Killing America by Eli Steele. He created a documentary and then they tried to sue him for it. For copyright, it shows footage of a school board. They tried to sue him and say, you can't use that, it doesn't qualify as fair use. Rather than play the legal game, he just decided he would release it for free on as many platforms as possible. So we have this one for free on YouTube. We are going to talk about it. The subjects are the introduction of ideology in public education and the unintended consequences of pushing equity and the externalities that creates. So I'll just shut up and we can watch the first part of it and just chime in when you feel necessary.
Kike, I hope your family dies and burns in hell. Glory to Hamas. Hamas are freedom fighters. I hope Tel Aviv gets bombed. What's your number? Show me your arm. Will anti-Semitism be covered in ethnic studies? No. How do you fit 6 million Jews in a Volkswagen? In an ashtray. What is the difference between pizza and Jews? The pizza doesn't scream if you put it in the oven. All of these were said by students and teachers at schools around the Bay Area.
How did it make you feel?
Sad, bit hopeless to see history repeating itself yet again. But also motivated to speak up and do something about it. I always wanted to be an American. When my family made the difficult decision to emigrate from the Soviet Union, they realized they had to leave everything behind. My parents were both physicians. My mom, she just finished saving a child's life, and on her way home, as she's walking, someone spat in her and called her a dirty Jew. She said, I do not want my daughter to grow up having this as her norm. My parents were ecstatic when we finally were free in America. I was that poor immigrant kid who didn't speak English. So I tried my hardest. I watched a lot of TV, which I loved to learn about the different cultures. But I never felt anti-Semitism growing up. We woke up that morning in disbelief. It really felt like medievalism 2.0, but seeing the complete disregard from folks here, all the support for the violence. To see what is happening in my kids' schools, the fact that my parents sacrificed everything to come here so I wouldn't have to suffer, and now my kids, I'm watching them suffer.
Every place has a story.
So one of the key differences between the time teenagers seemed to be growing up and when I did was my American history took place before 9/11 was in a book. It was a thing we watched, we lived through it. I was very young. I didn't really understand it. One day they just pulled us out of school, middle of the school day. And it was on the news. You know, you saw the guy fall off the tower and you saw the smoke, but like you didn't really understand, like, okay, so this is going to be an event that shapes national history. What we didn't know at the time, 20 years later, was that it would shape world history and foreign policy probably for forever, or for at least the lifespan of America as a country. I just remember my dad was dressed funny. He had to sit me down. He was in the military. He said, okay, this is going to make a lot of sense to you, but I got to go to work. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I'm not coming back for a long time because some things happened. Some bad men did some things. And like, again, I was a little kid, so I was like, that's really cool. Hey, can I go play with my neighbor? Because I didn't get it. When I was their age, everyone was still trying to get in on the back end of the war on terror. So at their age, I had a fundamental hatred towards Islamic extremism. And it seems like teenagers nowadays relate to it in this country for whatever reason why. It's just beyond me. But they seem to identify more with Islamic extremism than they do with democratic countries. So it's definitely a weird shift to see. I want to talk more on it, but I cannot explain it. I have literally nothing here. So we'll just keep going. Maybe I have something useful to say later.
Story. The Bay Area's story is one of nonconformity. The American dream. Go west, young man.
I'm Steve Jobs from Apple Computer. We're very glad to be here tonight.
A place where everybody belongs.
We celebrate our diversity.
How then did anti-Semitism explode in such a place?
Welcome to our Wednesday, November 15, 2023 regular board meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Sequoia Union High School District.
Sorry. And Superintendent Crystal.
All right, I'm going to speak on her behalf. It's okay. Tonight I'm speaking as a parent of two Woodside students. Clearly, it is offensive. At a quick glance, it is a swastika. Had that graffiti been offensive to any other minority group, there would have been a stronger reaction from the district and administrators. Our district too often has turned a blind eye to anti-Semitism.
This week is United Against Hate Week, and I believe that I speak for the whole board when I say our commitment to stand united against hate in any form against any person for any reason.
It's worrisome to see.
So before we get into the young man's comments, I think it's easier to get away with anti-Semitism under the new lens we have for oppression, where under the original Marxist lens, oppression was class-based. He refers to it a lot in the manifesto as class antagonism. And in the modern neo-Marxist lens, class is not relevant at all. Race is the guiding factor. So even if you are a minority such as being Jewish, you're still white. And at a glance, that makes you more identified as the oppressor. I watched people tell me Claudine Gay was oppressed as president of like the world's most prestigious higher education institute. And I've watched people like Bowman and LeBron who occupy incredibly comfortable, incredibly successful spaces, sell oppression independent of their class because it wouldn't play if they used their class. So the new lens needs something that makes you a victim by default and prevents you from moving out of the victim class. Because if you could move up, they couldn't sell you the oppression. It would never get better, and you'd never be able to look down and go, no, I think I've made it out. I think I'm okay now. So it becomes easily excusable when the minority targeted is white, or closer to white than other marginalized groups. So that's a quick answer to that one. Is the neo-Marxist lens doesn't use anything but race. You can identify the oppressed at a glance.
See the trend of more hate rather than less hate. When I open things like Instagram and I see kind of my peers and students that I see every day walking across the halls, I see them posting things online that is definitely hate speech and definitely anti-Semitic.
They spent the board meeting talking about microaggressions when we have explicit anti-Semitism. So how do you do DEI training, these professional developments that we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on, and not get the basics covered? And our Jewish students are being gaslighted.
Why couldn't people, after more than half a century of diversity efforts, easily condemn anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism has been viewed as the longest hate because it's been around for thousands of years. Anti-Semitism has longevity because it is a conspiracy theory.
Anti-Semitism always rises when people resort to scapegoating. The Crusades, the Black Death Plague, Nazi Germany, and now today.
Israel murdered their own people on October 7th.
Calling Hamas a terrorist organization is ridiculous, racist. I support the right of Palestinians to resist occupation, including through Hamas.
So again, just wild to me. Having had 9/11 as an experience, and having had my 8 years in the service, and just living in the post 9/11 world, to see so many people so willing to accept the things that we admonished when I was younger. And I do blame certain amounts of media censorship. So Al Jazeera is now a news network, is what they parade as. That used to be the place you had to go through on a link on some shady website to watch the beheadings. They used to behead people live on Al Jazeera. It was the place you could watch them beat women to death with rocks for who the fuck knows what. Probably nothing transgressive in any other society. So Hamas is a carbon copy of those organizations. They aren't trying to create a democratic state. They aren't trying to make the next Singapore. They are aligned with the Sharia states in their region, and they want to model their state after those. And part of Sharia states is no one but Muslims. So to see people in the Western world who value individuality, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, bodily autonomy, support an organization that would take that away from them by force, given the opportunity, is just unbelievable to me. And again, I do blame it on a certain amount of media censorship. Obviously, the beheadings and the shootings and some of the stuff you would have had to dig for, that I did dig for, during the October 7th attacks, that shouldn't be like on your Facebook page, but it should be accessible somewhere. And people should see it, as grim and as dark as it is, and as hard as it is to watch, because people think Hamas are the good guys, and that's just a wild assertion. I can't wrap my head around it.
There's always been cause in the eyes of the anti-Semite to scapegoat Jews over their roles in society. Some would argue that that's because the Jew also reminds the world of what is moral, of what our responsibilities are to each other, and they want to live in an immoral or amoral world.
The Bay Area is known for its high-tech wealth and general sophistication. If anti-Semitism is the symptom of a deeper problem, what is that problem? Part of the answer is here. The school board met to vote on whether or not to restore the honors classes that had been eliminated in the name of equity.
I think continuing to offer the advanced classes is very important because we should teach our kids that if you're bright and you're willing to work hard, you can achieve.
We do not feel that our kids have been held back by the recent course changes.
The school district had, over the course of around 8 years, without talking to the community and without the specific approval of the board, taken away a lot of honors classes such as AS English 1, AS Chemistry, AS Physics, AS Biology.
The only way to offer a student the possibility to do so is to give them honor classes to help them prepare for AP classes. One size doesn't fit all.
It's discriminating to say that certain students are too smart to be in the class with students who do not come from a high education.
The primary motivation of detracking is it's supposed to be kind of the solution for the achievement gap. Why are certain demographics signing up for honors classes a lot more than other demographics?
The loudest voices are often the most ignorant, and that being loudest doesn't make you more worthy of consideration or respect. Acknowledge the white fragility in the room and do better. Thank you.
So that's a pretty common tactic for shutting down discourse, is to introduce race into the conversation. Because if you were raised as like a normal, decent person, race is not the criteria by which you judge other people. Once it's introduced, you put yourself on the back foot so as not to engage in that because you were taught not to. And I was taught not to, and I straight up won't because it's asinine. It's asinine to assume that someone is better off or worse off based on race, or that they could be more or less smart based on race. So it absolutely puts people on the back foot. Now they don't want to move forward because, well, gosh, what if they call me a racist? Luckily, this strategy was nerfed sometime in 2022 when Cori Bush called everything she saw ever racist, and people realized, got it, she means she doesn't agree. So that's a common tactic that's starting to die off, thank God. But in, I want to say like 2020 to like mid 2022, if someone didn't agree with you, it was racism. Luckily, we're starting to in 2024 move away from that, at least here at the beginning of this year. With the election coming up, we'll see, because that may get really, really heavily reintroduced into conversations.
Menlo Atherton High School has lost more honors classes than any school in the district. One reason why? It's feeder schools. Cesar Chavez Middle School is based in East Palo Alto, a lower income, working class, and largely immigrant neighborhood. In the school year of 2022, 13.7% of its students met or exceeded grade level standards in English. In math, it was 3.7%. On the other side of Menlo Atherton High is La Entrada Middle School, located in an affluent neighborhood. 84.5% of its students met or exceeded.
Now, as you look at these numbers, I want you to remember that neo-Marxism did away with the class-based lens for determining who was the downtrodden. And the only reason I want you to keep that in mind as we go forward is because it seems like the more affluent neighborhood has more resources, is making higher percentage points in terms of who's succeeding. And the poorer neighborhood with less resources is not. my interpretation of it is that resources determine the level of success, not race.
The grade level standard in English. In math, it was 80.5%. In 2023, Cesar Chavez was 4 years behind the national average in math, and La Entrada was 4 years ahead, an 8-year gap.
My community really believes in pushing forward the movement of equity. How can we make these spaces more equitable for all of our students?
The difference between normal and honors was definitely very significant, and those normal classes are seen around the school as kind of very easy and very fluff classes.
My personal experience, in middle school, I wasn't being challenged enough. So when I finally got to high school, it was a relief being able to take classes that I felt like were challenging. Race and education should never be in the same sentence or in the same debate.
When they take away an honors track, what it means is that students from these other districts are sitting in the same classroom as our district. And I'm not sure why that is very upsetting to some.
The reason it's upsetting is because the student, especially if it's your child and you want them to succeed, you want them to have the opportunity. And what you did was you took away the opportunity from them so that someone who didn't have it feels better. You punished someone not responsible to help someone feel better about their situation. And my heart bleeds for the people who don't have the opportunity. But you didn't create equality of opportunity. You didn't even create equity. You created raw equality. Now no one has the opportunity. Everyone has to be at the same level. Equity is not the same as equality of outcome. There's a difference. Equity would be saying, hey, he didn't have the same kind of resources where this student used to be, so this student can go to honors because they're ready, but to create the equality of opportunity and to add the equity, which is what they keep talking about. It's not what they're doing, but they keep using the word. I feel like there's an Inigo Montoya meme waiting to happen here. What they actually did was just create that raw equal. Equity would have been giving that student that was behind more resources than the honor student. The honor student doesn't need them. He's ready. He can go and challenge himself in those higher classes. Equity would have been giving that lower ranking student more resources for tutoring, after school programs to help him understand the more difficult concepts he's struggling with. You didn't do that. There's no equity here. You just keep saying equity because it's a great tagline, but it's not what you did.
What no one is saying out loud is that racial equity played a role in the removal of honors classes. Cesar Chavez is 80% Hispanic. La Entrada is mostly white and Asian.
Someone with a 5th grade level of reading is now in the same class as someone with actually a 10th or 11th grade reading. We're trying to correct problems at the high school level where the root problems are actually at the elementary school level. In the name of equity, we're creating more inequity.
The last school board meeting lasted until 1 a.m. as the community debated the issue of honors classes. Today, the same board was to vote on the question of restoring the honors classes. Instead, they got sidetracked over the question of whether or not they had received enough input from the community.
I personally know of students that can pay and did pay that $500 to $2,000 to take advanced chemistry, to take advanced or honors physics. By not offering that opportunity, which students are we really hurting?
What I am struggling with, and although I disagree with Jacob, I think we can't assume that a certain percentage of people agree or disagree because we don't have earnest feedback from communities.
Many high schools across America placed racial equity before merit. Even the crown jewel of San Francisco, Lowell High School.
When I was first placed in just regular classes, and I did not feel too challenged. And even though my English wasn't very good, my parents went and insisted that I get placed in, at the time, honors was called a GATE program. And the principal laughed. Lowell, as hard as it was, and it was hard, it opened up the doors for college, and now obviously I'm a physician.
That's another thing I forgot to bring up. I know I'm eating up a lot of our time in this video by talking, but you're talking about people in high school who are really trying to get into that next step, which would be higher education, college. The dream there would be the Ivy League and university. I'm not so sure about Ivy League anymore after its repeated controversies, but one of the things you need to do in the 4-year high school program is make yourself look as desirable as you can. So when the people who are supposed to be helping you do that tell you, hey, there's no more honors classes, there's no more of these I guess big ticket items for your academic reputation that you can put down on paper and sell to higher education, you're putting everyone a step back so that they're equal with the people who are already a step back. If you wanted to create it in a way that was more equitable, you would be trying to move everyone forward, not everyone back. So I feel like the concept, just on its face, is completely backwards.
So I do think that I'm the epitome of the American dream. I don't think that's what kids are being taught today. They're not being taught about the American dream. In fact, they're being taught that that's a lie.
The San Francisco Unified School Board felt there was not equitable representation among the races at Lowell High. There were too many Asians.
Kevin Bogus, president, thinks there are too many Asians in SFUSD.
If you're in 6th grade and you're reading at 2nd grade level, what are you doing in class? Sleeping.
Democratic Socialists of America who want to abolish merit in San Francisco, are we gonna let that happen? No!
Right after George Floyd, it seemed that there was an injustice that had occurred with what had happened to George Floyd, but then that injustice, just like napalm, triggered injustices throughout all of our school boards across the nation. All these merit-based high schools were suddenly under attack by the progressive members of the Board of Education who had decided that grades and test scores were racist.
In order to fix a problem, you have to figure out what the problem is.
Our African American students, only 10% can pass the 8th grade admissions or the standardized test, and you're worried about Lowell. Your policies are racist. You are disgusting, all of you.
The school board literally had spent 10 years removing algebra from the 8th grade, trying to dismantle STEM programs, dismantle the ability of students to take AP classes. What ended up happening under lottery admission was that at the end of the first semester, we had at least 200 students with at least 1 D or 1 F, and they were struggling. The San Francisco School Board weaponized everybody's skin color, and you were either an oppressor or the oppressed.
Remember what I said about that neo-Marxist lens? And this is it at play. When it's the only thing that matters, it is first and last in your identity, nothing else could possibly be as important. And because that's your focus, you aren't focusing on something that's maybe more important. I'm not saying your identity isn't important. I'm saying if your identity is tied to a race, you have a flawed perception of your own identity. You're either going to become a permanent victim or an insufferable narcissist. Because in both cases, your identity is tied to something you didn't choose. A board of education should not be caught up in race-based politics. It should probably be caught up in education. And it seems like a lot of grifters were able to make their way into a board of education on the back of the turmoil of 2020 and impose an ideology that was centered around race rather than policies that were centered around education. The primary holder of that L is going to be the student it was meant to serve.
It's a slippery slope because when an Asian person is attacked on the street, when they are killed, who cares? Because there's too many Asians.
The progressive dogma, the ideology of promoting diversity is really creating a system of division and hatred. We see the anti-Semitic movement growing in the United States. We celebrated not only our diversity, but we've forgotten to celebrate what we have in common. We are Americans.
But are we?
So if there's a chance to talk about it, I would love to have just a minute or two at the end to talk about what the removal of a national identity and the introduction of multiculturalism has kind of done as far as shaping the future of America, especially in the younger generation, where the old national identity is seen as like the big Western, oh God, what the hell do they call it? The big evil. America is the big evil. And I think the death of the national identity has done a lot to tribalize and divide American people. Along so many lines, I feel like it's almost impossible to repair at this point. It definitely started with racial focus, but racial lines are not the only places this country is divided along anymore. But we'll see if the video kind of gives me a good segue into that.
Have we betrayed the promise of the civil rights movement by making race our guiding light once again? Isn't it this move to tribalism that has set the stage for today's anti-Semitism? Back at the school board meeting, instead of voting on the honors classes, the debate over community input continued.
We heard a public comment from a member of our community, not tonight, but earlier, who also wrote an op-ed for local papers. He described himself as a brown immigrant who spent the first few years of his life in this country in a crowded, low-income studio apartment. His article included the sentence, and this really stuck with me. Many parents of children under this board's charge remain silent for fear of accusation of racism.
The notion that you take a high-achieving kid and bring him into this mixed-level class for the sake of the kids with an achievement gap to help teach them better educational values, what to value about education, and then in the classroom, emphasize white, I'm going to use the language, white notions of success.
I know this fear is real because I've heard from people who've had it happen to them.
Success and achievement are not ethnic. I find that insulting. What does that mean that, like, I'm brown, but I have white values? What am I? Stop it. Just stop.
There is nothing racially focused, and I don't know where this rumor started. There is nothing racially focused or racial biased about wanting to be a strong academic. There is a certain type of prestige and virtue that comes with being a strong academic, and I do not believe that should be separated along racial lines. It is an inherently good thing for anyone of any race to want to achieve. I couldn't do it. I did not do well in school. I am still not much of an academic. I am terrible at academia in general, and it's something I admire greatly in a lot of other people. Regardless of their race or ethnicity, there is nothing racially defining about being intelligent, sophisticated, or an academic. I don't know if you've heard that, but if you did hear it, they were lying to you. They just suck at life, and they want you to suck as much.
We may be hearing from the vocal minority, but I don't think it's because most other parents don't agree with them, but because I think other parents are hesitant to come forward with their opinions.
We have delivered a very poor educational product for several decades now. And instead of addressing why, it's just easier to blame inequities. Kids are certainly not getting more educated, but we all are getting more fearful, more angry, and more tribal.
I started to see the equity thing come up when this very first thing was when they said, no, the kids of color, we're going to reduce the amount of kids of color who are going to get suspended because of the years of racism sometime around the Obama administration is when I started noticing the change. Started noticing the kind of administrators that were getting hired. And then slowly, they started bringing out the kids with special needs, special education. Little by little, what they would do is they were starting to mainstream them, and then pretty soon they just said complete 100% mainstream in the name of social justice. And I thought it was injustice to some of these kids because.
So, I haven't really thought about it. I'm not going to take too much time on it because I don't know what I think yet. But he does bring up a great question. When does inclusion become harmful? When does inclusion subjectively become harmful objectively? I'm just asking the question. I don't know what I think about it yet.
Because they could not handle it.
So my daughter sends me what she did at school today, and she played a celebrity guessing game. I asked her what the point of the activity was, and she honestly has no idea, other than she was shown pictures of celebrities, and she had to guess what the race was.
They want to get rid of that honors
Public funded schools.
And remember that honors classes is a way of showing if I work hard, I want to advance myself, I have the opportunity to do well here in America. Well, they're trying to take that all away.
You know, I thought this room was supposed to be air conditioned, man.
The grading scale they're trying to push onto teachers. They're calling it standard-based grading. And this is where an A is 100% to 80% is an A, 80% to 60% is a B, which is so embarrassing to me as a teacher.
So what he's not saying up front is what should be said, is that celebrating mediocrity punishes meritocracy. To celebrate the lowest possible standard hamstrings the people that perform above that standard.
My daughter came home with another homework assignment, designing race. How was race created? Why was race created? And by definitions, they want us to discuss settler colonialism, the social hierarchy. Do you think Black people are faster than white people? What are your thoughts? What does it mean to be Black?
Some teachers do not allow their kids to express in the classroom their own opinions. The author is saying this, you describe why you disagree or why you agree. The kids are being not allowed to do that because your thinking doesn't go along with the mass, the general rule or the community way of thinking. They talk about community in the classroom, that teachers need to build a community inside of the classroom.
My daughter's a senior in high school.
The reason I keep bringing up Marxism is because it keeps being relevant. And it sounds like what the teachers did was create an echo chamber where wrongthink would be easily identified. And if you're familiar with Orwellian novels, wrongthink was how they isolated you and targeted you for being the enemy of whatever the constructed hierarchy of power was at the time. And that sounds like that's what they're doing, is they create an echo chamber, and anything that doesn't sound like an echo is immediately identified as being wrongthink. And you can target that and either ostracize it until it goes away or badger it until it conforms with whatever the echo chamber is saying.
She took AP European History and AP US History. She did not have one lesson on the Holocaust.
They want everything to be along the same lines of thinking, it seems, or the same ways of feeling about certain things. The government is going to take care of you. You don't need to worry about honors, being in the honors track. You know, you just belong in here with all the rest of society right here. And everybody's going to feel well. everybody's going to have money, everybody's going to be treated the same. Everybody now all of a sudden gets a trophy. Everybody here deserves that passing grade. And if that doesn't sound Marxist, I don't know what else. You need to look and study the history, because that's what's happening here under our noses here in America.
At the school board meeting, the fear grows that the issue of honors classes will not be voted on.
At this moment, in both my and a lot of other seniors across the district time of applying to college and seeking letters of recommendation, some students they don't feel safe speaking out on such an issue. Students are scared that this may result in the issue just being kind of like put in the parking lot and not revisited again.
I think if we actually put it on the calendar versus put it in a parking lot, that would be different, because then there is not an infinite, we will talk about it.
Lowering educational standards in the name of equity certainly contributes to the ignorance that feeds anti-Semitism. But ignorance alone doesn't explain the frightening righteousness behind the current wave of anti-Semitism.
Governor Newsom signed a bill today that makes California one of the first states in the nation to list ethnic studies as a graduation requirement for all public high school students.
I envisioned ethnic studies to be kind of how I grew up. In my poor little circle, there was the Indians, the blacks, the Asians, the Russians, the Jews that went over each other's houses, ate each other's food. This was entirely something different. Everything was about power.
After October 7th, a teacher at Menlo Atherton High, Chloe Gentile Montgomery, gave a presentation on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in her ethnic studies and world history class. She introduced the concept of the dominant narrative that belongs to the oppressor class and the counter-narrative that belongs to the oppressed class.
Liberated ethnic studies is based on a paradigm of the idea that the world is divided into the oppressed and the oppressors.
Again, I don't want to keep bringing up Marxist-style communism, but the basis for Marx and Engels' Communist Manifesto was the whole world only exists within the realm of the oppressed and the oppressor. And in his world, class antagonism was defined by the bourgeoisie at the top and the proletariat at the bottom. Sorry, I think we just had a network spike. So I keep bringing it up because neo-Marxism is the race-based version of what Marx and Engels wrote all those years ago. And I swear to God, I'll stop bringing it up when it stops being relevant. But that's exactly what you're seeing, is you're seeing ideologues, Marxist ideologues, taking the focus away from class, pushing it into race, and then bringing it to whatever institution they happen to work for. I did public education. I couldn't tell you which of my teachers were Republicans or Democrats. They didn't bring it up as a matter of professional courtesy. They wanted the students to be allowed to think in their own way. So they didn't give you teacher's pet brownie points for agreeing with Democratic or Republican points of view. I have no idea who let overly political ideologues start holding positions as important as teaching your children. And for those ideologues to be very obviously enwrapped and enshrined in these Marxist ideologies, it's wild. Like, how did that go under the radar? There's no way. Someone had to know, and they just didn't say so. Over the course of a decade, someone had to know. Anyway, hopefully I don't have to bring it up again.
And when you put that in front of kids, what happens is that kids automatically want to be defined as the victim.
She then asked,
Gosh, we're on a roll with this video. So there's a reason the race-based version of Marxism benefits no one. And she hit it right on the head there, is that you don't want to be the oppressor. You will do anything in your power to be the victim, which is not a normal frame of mind. You don't want to work for X amount of time and gain nothing to remain a victim. But victimhood has one key benefit that being the oppressor doesn't, and that's that you will always have the moral high horse. You will never be in the wrong. Violence, physical, unmitigated, horrifying violence on behalf of the oppressed isn't violence. It's not terrorism. It's resistance, right? You've heard that before when it comes to the Palestinian-Israel debate. It's resistance. It's not. It is just unmitigated, targeted, horrifying violence. But as a member of the oppressed, you get to stay on that high horse. So you will hamstring yourself, and you will deny yourself every opportunity, because God forbid you become the oppressor. And I do feel like people later in life grow out of it when they become either responsible or beholden to something greater than themselves. When it's just you as a teenager who's only responsible for yourself, justifying the horrifying violence and sexual violence against women in Israel is very easy for you to do, because you have nothing to consider but your own victimhood. When you get older and you're responsible for your home or your family or your children, suddenly being a victim does not have the appeal. The moral high horse can trot itself down the road. I'd rather be the oppressor with some resources and be able to take care of my people. I would rather take on the title of oppressor in public opinion, if not in reality, because it's very rarely in reality you will transition into being an actual oppressor. I would rather take on the title of oppressor to provide for those dependent on me opportunities that I believe they need to have to succeed in life. So I do believe people grow out of it. But at a younger age, it is so easy to hamstring yourself in the rat race that is life, so that you never have to don the title oppressor. And I don't think it's a good place to put young people. I think they will ruin their lives trying to stay at the bottom to maintain some type of fake moral superiority. I think it's a horrifying thing to do to especially teenagers who are still trying to figure out who they are and interact with the world in a way that makes sense to them.
what is happening in Israel and Palestine? And what are the dominant and counter narratives?
What happens is when you get this version, this brand of ethnic studies into classrooms, it becomes morphed into something entirely different and almost the opposite of what people intend. Violent and radical figures are elevated and lionized as the heroes, and downplayed or even omitted are the role models that we would expect. So you don't learn about Martin Luther King Jr., you don't learn about Thurgood Marshall, you don't learn about Rosa Parks.
The teacher then sets the table with notes that exclude mention of Hamas as a terrorist group, and that makes the false claim that Hamas mainly attacks soldiers and also some civilians, when civilians were in fact the main target.
The objective is to overthrow a system. It's very different from let's all work together to fix aspects of our system.
Beginning in the late 1960s, the ideology began to set into California universities. I think it was first San Francisco State University, if I'm not mistaken.
Under the umbrella of the Third World Liberation Front, Asian, Latino, and Native American students, as well as progressive whites, joined forces with the Black Student Union.
One of the major objectives was to start a school of ethnic studies.
This is the first time in the history of all existing colleges in the United States that we have dissolved class barriers between people of the third world.
in the name of equity to remove honors classes, it is all directly related to this liberated ethnic studies notion of victimhood. What happens is if we lower the standards, then good news, the student can succeed. But it also impacts the students that could be doing better, because it's telling them the better you do, the more oppressive you are.
Ethnic studies
Forcing equality of outcome in the
jumped
name
the
of
lab into
equity.
the largest societies, devising curricula for K through 12 public schools so they can take their ideas about settler colonialism and about critical consciousness, and they can indoctrinate a generation of activists.
Every year, if you teach a kid enough times that they are a victim of the system, or they are an oppressor and need to change their ways to be closer to the victim, eventually it sinks in.
Miss Gentile Montgomery then establishes Israel as the oppressor, the dominant narrative, showing a false map of Palestine in all green, and then Israel stealing the land over the years. She then falsely quotes the UN as saying that the creation of Israel is illegal.
It emphasizes that it's important to discuss the current apartheid in Israel.
Generation, they will take all of your places and ensure Israel falls.
That it's important to discuss the genocide and the ethnic cleansing that goes on in Israel.
Vegas, you get high, we charge you with genocide.
That it's important to make clear the connections, this is a quote, between the struggle for Palestinian rights and the struggles of indigenous Black and brown communities by incorporating it into discussions of criminalizations of youth, deep dive into Native American history in your area and connecting it to settler colonialism in Palestine. Instead of seeing Israel as a prime example of liberation in our time, of an indigenous people returning to a land, instead, Israel becomes the boogeyman.
What is the cost of teaching ideological lies in the classroom? Several parents, Jewish and non-Jewish, complained about the lesson taught by Ms. Montgomery and others to the school board. The same board that was now voting on restoring the honors classes.
But right now, not doing anything is having no board direction. So if that's what we want to do, I'll respect that as a board, but I think we have to formalize that in some way. That's my only point.
Would that motion also have time for, like, a study session, time for public comment, or would it be solely administrators presenting the plan?
We would not decide that now. That would be up to the board president and myself when we agenda plan.
Okay, so I will make that motion. Does anyone want to second it? Let's take a vote on that.
At first, it seemed like the most anticlimactic climax. Nothing happened, but everything happened.
Yesterday was a major delay tactic. The board refused to go on record with an actual vote. The problem is the current president, who actually believes in honors and academic standards, that was his last meeting. The new president that will be starting, I don't believe has any intention of bringing honors back to this district. So nothing was accomplished yesterday. It was a major delay tactic. It was political, and I don't think anything's going to change in the right direction with this school.
Things got worse.
Additional context and nuance to the slides during class, nuance that is missed when slides are sent anonymously without the context of what actually went on in my classroom when the lesson was given.
Among many falsehoods included in the lesson, it taught that Israel, the country that I and my children are citizens of, is illegal and heavily implied it should not exist.
The meeting collapsed into tribalism. A student held up a sign that read, "Let's not forget that the IDF lied about the beheading of 40 babies, provoking a father whose family in Israel was severely impacted by October 7th. This is the turmoil that we have been searching for all along.
And our students can have signs up for, against, or whoever. We've had meetings like, sir,
The turmoil that grows in the Trojan horse of DEI that permits anti-Semitism. A turmoil that arises out of a shift in morality within our society.
You're calling them freedom fighters. Right.
Moving away from the individualism of the Judeo-Christian values toward the tribalism of the oppressed oppressor ideology has created for America a new morality.
I believe Israel has no right to exist. I believe the United States has no right to exist.
A morality that values people of color over character.
I believe every settler colony who has committed genocide against native peoples, against indigenous people, has no right to exist.
I'm actually slightly familiar with this one. This is the founder of Woke Kindergarten, whose goal while eating, I think it was just over $500,000 in taxpayer dollars, was to teach your kindergarten-age children to question the validity of the United States as a country. There was a quote. It was abolitionist education, because kindergartners need that. They need to be activists first and social second. Except that isn't true, and no one with any data on it would tell you it's true. But we let race grifters into education because we thought ESG and DEI made more sense than, I don't know, normal education. And again, the ironic part is she will stuff her pockets with taxpayer dollars in a Western country while screaming Western countries should not exist. So, I don't know, you just let that speak for itself. If it makes you feel any better, I believe she was employed in California by a school district in California, and they have since cut that contract after... you can see it at the top of her line right there, Woke Kindergarten. She got on her company Twitter and made literally this exact video. So, hey, I guess we can take the small wins where we get them, right?
A morality that demonizes whites as the oppressors, including Jews, as well as the white-adjacent Asians.
Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism?
A morality that justifies anti-Semitism.
Again, it depends on the context.
A morality that often...
Okay, as a side statement, if you need context to condemn dehumanizing people, you might be a terrible person. Just a thought.
Offers protections to the Ms. Montgomerys of America and makes this teacher fear for his job.
Stand and Deliver was a very important movie for me because I was going into teaching. I wanted to be like him. You know, at the end, when you see the character Angel, they're listing the names of the kids who passed the AP exam.
Fuentes, Rafaela. 4. Javier Perez.
And you see this kid who probably had no hope for any kind of future growing up in a gang environment, in a barrio, Hispanic neighborhood, and getting a 5. Love America, cherish America, understand what America stands for. And America stands for the opportunity that you are given here in this country to make it great. But you have to put in the work. Nobody's going to give it to you.
If anti-Semitism is the symptom of a deeper problem, then it is that too many of us Americans have forgotten how to live in freedom.
The American dream is about our personal agency and that we can overcome hardships and that You know, as bad as things are, you find the silver lining and you bring yourself up. That's why Jews are hated so much, is because we refuse to be victims. Even with my daughter going down the hall and someone screaming kike. No.
If we lose the opportunity that the United States provide, we have nothing. We're back in medieval times where the kings stay kings and the peasants stay peasants.
Being able to succeed despite not having anything when you're born. You know, making something of yourself from nothing. That's what we want to instill in our kids. The grit, the resilience that makes up America. That's why my family wanted to come here and leave everything behind for this freedom that is quickly being taken away from us.
Too many of us have forgotten how to be Americans.
All right. So that was Killing America by Eli Steele. I think it was a very interesting documentary. If you get a chance, go ahead and watch it yourself without my commentary. Focus in on it a little bit and tell me what you think about it. We are over an hour here, but just over, so we're about where I wanted to be. But there's games to be played and leisure to be had, so it can't all be public discourse, right? So I'm going to go ahead and take off. Let me know what you guys think. If you agree, disagree, if you want to take this whole video down and just trash my opinions the whole time, whatever gets this piece of work out there, I think that's good enough for me. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your week and a great rest of the year. Hang in there, guys. Things are going to